Undercover boss gets fries, sees inside bag, and instantly calls kitchen staff. Garrett Langston drummed his fingers against the steering wheel of his rented Honda Civic, a far cry from the Tesla Model S he typically drove. The vehicle's beige interior smelled faintly of pine air freshener, deliberately chosen for its unremarkable appearance. No one would expect the CEO of Quick Bite, the nation's fifth-largest fast food chain, to be sitting in this car, wearing a threadbare Detroit Tigers cap pulled low over his eyes. He adjusted the fake beard affixed to his jawline with spirit gum, wincing at the slight pull against his skin. The glasses, thick black frames with non-prescription lenses, kept sliding down his nose. Garrett pushed them back up for what felt like the 100th time that morning and checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. Not bad, he murmured to himself. The delivery driver uniform completed the look, a generic blue polo with khaki pants and scuffed work boots. The name tag pinned to his chest read, Gary. Simple. Forgettable. This wasn't his first rodeo with undercover work. Garrett had built Quick Bite from 3 struggling locations to over 2,000 across the country by understanding what happened on the front lines. But this visit felt different. The Detroit Woodward Avenue location had been one of his original 3 restaurants, the very first he'd ever purchased with his business loan 26 years ago. Back then, it had been the cornerstone of his fledgling empire, consistently outperforming the others. Now it was hemorrhaging money. The quarterly reports painted a bleak picture: customer satisfaction scores down 18%, employee turnover at 87%, and profitability down 22% year-over-year. The regional manager had suggested closing it, citing neighborhood decline and structural issues with the team. But Garrett couldn't bring himself to shutter his first location without seeing the problems firsthand. He took a deep breath and started the car. The lunch rush would be starting soon. Perfect timing to blend in with the crowd and observe the restaurant at its most stressed. The Quick Bite logo, a stylized burger with a lightning bolt through it, seemed faded on the building's facade as he pulled into the parking lot. The landscaping looked neglected, with patchy grass and overfilled trash cans near the entrance. A teenage couple argued loudly by the door, while an elderly man struggled to open it without assistance. Starting with the customer experience, Garrett muttered, making mental notes. He parked at the far end of the lot, activated the voice recorder on his phone, and began speaking quietly. Woodward Avenue location, exterior assessment. Signage needs refreshing. Landscaping neglected. No staff assisting with door access for elderly or disabled customers. Trash overflow suggests irregular maintenance schedule. He watched the flow of customers for several minutes before joining the drive-through line. The car in front of him waited for nearly 7 minutes before reaching the speaker, well above the company's 4-minute standard. When his turn came, a tinny female voice crackled through the speaker. Welcome to Quick Bite. What can I get started for you? At least the greeting was standard protocol. Garrett cleared his throat, pitching his voice slightly higher than normal. Hi there. Can I get a number 2 combo with a Diet Coke, please? That's the double burger with fries and a drink. Anything else? No, that'll do it. $7.49 at the window. Garrett noted the absence of upselling, another company standard ignored. The line moved slowly, giving him time to observe a young man in Quick Bite uniform taking his break by the dumpsters, scrolling through his phone rather than cleaning the parking lot as break policy dictated. When he finally reached the window, a young woman with tired eyes and a messy ponytail handed him the drink without making eye contact. Her name tag read, Shanice. No smile, no greeting, just mechanical movements as she processed his payment. Her uniform shirt had a small stain near the collar. Be about 3 minutes on your food, she said flatly, closing the window before he could respond. Garrett sipped his drink. At least the soda-to-ice ratio was correct, and used the wait time to scan the visible kitchen area. 2 cooks moved with little urgency, while a manager type, based on the different colored shirt, stared at a computer in the back, completely disengaged from the operation. The food warmer held several packages that had clearly been sitting too long, based on the condensation visible on the wrappers. When the window reopened, a different employee, This when a young man with Jamal on his name tag handed out the brown paper bag. "Have a good one," he said with a thin smile that at least suggested some effort. "Thanks." "Hey, how long have you worked here?" Garrett asked casually. The young man looked surprised at the personal question. "About 8 months." "How do you like it?" Jamal glanced over his shoulder, lowered his voice slightly, and said, "It's a job, you know. Some good people here, though." A car horn honked behind Garrett, ending the brief conversation. He nodded and pulled forward, noting that this small human interaction was the one bright spot in an otherwise dismal service experience. Instead of leaving immediately, Garrett parked in a nearby space and made more voice notes, describing the interaction in detail. The food sat unopened beside him. According to company standards, the bag should have been sealed with a quick bite sticker. It wasn't. The napkins should have been placed on top. He could already see they weren't visible. The receipt should have been stapled to the outside. It was merely tossed inside. A quick check of his watch showed the entire drive-through experience had taken 11 minutes and 20 seconds, nearly double the company benchmark of 6 minutes. He opened the bag and inspected the contents. The burger was correctly assembled but lukewarm. The fries, while fresh, were undersalted. Nothing was dramatically wrong, but nothing was right either. It was mediocrity served with indifference, perhaps the most dangerous threat to any service business. Garrett started his car again and headed toward Roosevelt Park, a few blocks away. He needed a quiet place to eat, observe other customers, and organize his thoughts before his next step. The park offered a good vantage point of the restaurant while giving him privacy to take detailed notes. As he drove, he reflected on what he'd seen. This wasn't merely a case of a declining neighborhood or structural issues as the regional manager had suggested. The problems were deeper, cultural, systemic. The employees moved like automatons, going through motions without purpose or passion. The management seemed invisible at best, absent at worst. Yet there was Jamal's comment. Some good people here. Despite everything, there might be salvageable talent within the location. The thought gave Garrett a sliver of hope. He parked under a large oak tree at the edge of Roosevelt Park, stopped the engine, and reached for the paper bag containing his meal. The playground nearby was filled with laughing children, a stark contrast to the joyless environment he'd just experienced. A group of office workers sat at picnic tables, enjoying their lunch break in the warm sunshine. Garrett placed his drink in the cup holder and set the paper bag on his lap. He reached inside for the burger, ready to evaluate it more thoroughly, when his fingers brushed against something that didn't belong, something flat and rectangular tucked beneath the napkins at the bottom of the bag. He pulled it out, confusion crossing his features. It was a plain white envelope, unsealed, with no markings on the outside. Nothing that should be in a quick bite order bag. Curiosity piqued, Garrett hesitated only briefly before opening the envelope. Inside was a modest stack of small bills and coins, ones, fives, quarters, dimes, along with a handwritten note on the back of a quick bite order slip. For Darnell's kidney surgery, $427 so far. Don't tell management. Garrett stared at the note, then at the money, then back at the note again. His burger lay forgotten on the dashboard. The French fries cooled untouched in their cardboard container. Whatever he had expected to find during his undercover visit, it wasn't this. He checked the receipt again, confirming the timestamp and register number. This wasn't random or accidental. Someone had deliberately placed this envelope in his bag. But why? Was it meant for someone else? A regular customer, perhaps? Or had someone recognized him despite his disguise? The questions swirled in his mind, but one thing was clear: he needed answers. And he needed them now. Garrett started the car engine with sudden determination. The lukewarm meal could wait. He pulled the fake beard from his face with a quick, painful tug, tossed the disguise items onto the passenger seat, and made a sharp U-turn. He was going back to the restaurant, not as Gary, the delivery driver, but as Garrett Langston, CEO of Quick Bite. And he was about to call every single kitchen staff member into the break room for an explanation that would change everything. The envelope sat on the passenger seat, its contents now carefully returned inside. Garrett couldn't shake the image of those crumpled bills and coins, a pitiful collection representing what must have been sacrifices from people earning minimum wage. $427. He'd spent more on dinner last night. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel. The name, Darnell, echoed in his mind. A dishwasher? A cook? Whoever he was, his co-workers were secretly collecting money for him, explicitly behind management's back. That alone spoke volumes about the culture at this location. Traffic slowed Garrett's return to the restaurant, giving him time to strategize. The corporate handbook had clear policies against unauthorized solicitation of funds on company property. Technically, everyone involved could be terminated. But something deeper was at play here, something that transcended policy manuals and quarterly metrics. As he pulled into the parking lot, Garrett spotted a familiar face, the regional manager, Blake Thompson, who was supposed to be overseeing this troubled location. Blake's luxury SUV was parked in the spot marked Management, its gleaming surface freshly washed despite the city's ongoing water conservation efforts. Just another detail that didn't sit right. Garrett parked beside it and stepped out, no longer hunched in his delivery driver persona but standing tall with the natural authority that had helped build his company. Several customers turning into the drive-through line did double takes, recognizing the face from company advertisements and news stories. "Is that the quick bite guy?" He ignored them, marching through the front entrance without hesitation. The teenage girl at the register looked up, customer service smile faltering as recognition dawned. "Mr. Langston? Where's your manager?" Garrett asked, his voice calm but firm. "In the office," she stammered, pointing toward the back. Blake Thompson was leaning back in his chair, feet propped on the desk, phone to his ear, laughing about a golf game planned for the weekend. The smile vanished when he saw Garrett standing in the doorway. "Todd, I'll call you back," he said quickly, scrambling to sit upright. "Mr. Langston! What an unexpected pleasure. If I'd known you were coming. I need the break room cleared for the next hour," Garrett interrupted. "And I need every kitchen staff member from this shift in there. Now." Blake's expression shifted from surprise to alarm. "Sir, we're in the middle of lunch service. This location is operating at 40% efficiency. I think you can spare them. Now." 10 minutes later, 7 nervous employees sat around the scratched laminate table in the break room. Garrett recognized Jamal from the drive-through window and noticed the anxious glances exchanged between staff members. Blake stood by the door, arms crossed, while the shift manager, a young woman whose name tag read Tasha, nervously twisted her hands in her lap. Garrett placed the envelope on the table. A collective intake of breath filled the room. "Who's Darnell?" he asked simply. Silence stretched for several painful seconds. Blake stepped forward. "Sir, if someone's been soliciting funds during work hours, I assure you." "Not now, Blake," Garrett said without looking at him. His eyes scanned the faces before him. "I'm not here about policy violations. I just want to know who Darnell is and why you're hiding money for his kidney surgery." A small voice from the back spoke up. He's not here today." Garrett turned to see a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark curly hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read, Evie. "And you are?" "Evie Coleman, sir. I work grill." "Tell me about Darnell, Evie." She glanced at her coworkers, who all seemed to be holding their breath. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. "Darnell Johnson. He's our dishwasher. Been here 5 years. Works harder than anyone, never complains. His son Marcus is 9 and has stage 4 kidney disease." Her voice trembled slightly. "Insurance won't cover the experimental treatment he needs. The specialists say it's his best chance, but it costs more than any of us make in a year," finished an older man with gray-streaked hair. "I'm Carlos. I've been cooking here since before you bought the place." Blake cleared his throat. "This is precisely the kind of distraction that's affecting our metrics. Personal problems should stay at home." Does Darnell leave his problems at home when he shows up for every shift? Garrett asked sharply. He turned back to the group. The envelope. Explain. Jamal spoke up. It was my idea. Darnell would never ask for help, too proud. So we started pooling what we could, tips, lunch money, whatever. But we needed somewhere safe to keep it. Why not tell management? Garrett asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. A chorus of bitter laughs answered him. Carlos shook his head. Last time someone needed help, Shanice's mom was sick, she asked for emergency time off. Blake here wrote her up for inadequate scheduling notification. All eyes turned to the regional manager, whose face had darkened. Garrett nodded slowly, the puzzle pieces falling into place. So you put the money in food bags? For safekeeping? Only for regulars we trust. Evie explained. Mrs. Winters comes every Tuesday, always leaves a 20 in the tip jar. That envelope was for her. Jamal must have mixed up the orders. Jamal hung his head. I'm sorry. It was my first time helping with it. The air in the break room felt electric with tension. These employees expected punishment, feared it, even. Instead, Garrett simply asked, How much does Darnell need for his son's treatment? Evie's eyes widened. The initial consultation and testing is $15,000. If he qualifies for the trial, the family portion would be another $50,000. Garrett absorbed the number without flinching. He reached for the envelope, but instead of confiscating it, he pulled out his wallet and added 5 crisp $100 bills to the collection. Tell me everything about Darnell Johnson and his son, he said quietly. I want to know their whole story. The break room fell silent as Evie told Darnell's story. She spoke of a single father who worked 2 jobs, dishwasher by day, office cleaner by night, sleeping barely 4 hours between shifts. Of a man who never missed his son's medical appointments, even if it meant going without sleep. Of Marcus, a bright 9-year-old who loved science experiments and baseball, now confined mostly to his home as his condition worsened. Last month, Evie continued, her voice catching, Darnell collapsed during his shift. Dehydration and exhaustion. He was back the next day, apologizing to us. Carlos added, Man's been saving every penny for years. When Marcus got the diagnosis 2 years ago, Darnell sold his car, moved to a cheaper apartment. Still couldn't make a dent in those medical bills. Blake shifted uncomfortably by the door. This is all very touching, but... The door swung open, cutting him off. A thin man in a dishwasher's apron stood frozen in the doorway, confusion evident on his tired face. Darnell, Evie breathed. Darnell Johnson was younger than Garrett had imagined, probably early 30s, but with the weathered look of someone far older. His quick-bite uniform hung loosely on his frame, suggesting recent weight loss. Dark circles ringed his eyes. Tasha said you needed me to... His words trailed off as he noticed Garrett, recognition dawning. Mr. Langston? What's happening? Garrett stood and extended his hand. Mr. Johnson. Please join us. Darnell hesitantly entered, shooting questioning glances at his coworkers. His eyes landed on the envelope on the table, and a flash of understanding, then panic, crossed his face. Sir, if this is about taking an extra shift meal sometimes, I can explain. It's not, Garrett assured him. Please sit down. Darnell lowered himself into the empty chair Evie pulled out for him, his posture rigid with tension. Garrett pushed the envelope toward him. Your colleagues have been collecting this for Marcus. Darnell stared at the envelope, then at his coworkers, shock evident. You've been what? We know about the experimental treatment, Jamal said. Mrs. Winters has a nephew who went through something similar. She's been helping us organize. But I never told anyone except... Darnell turned to Evie, who looked down guiltily. I overheard you on the phone with the hospital, she admitted. You were crying in your car after your shift. I told the others because I knew you wouldn't ask for help. Darnell's shoulders slumped, a complex mixture of emotions playing across his face. Embarrassment, gratitude, pride, fear. There's $927 there now, Garrett said quietly. Obviously not enough, but a start. Darnell shook his head, pushing the envelope back. I can't take this. It's against company policy. I could lose my job, and Marcus needs the insurance, limited as it is. Blake stepped forward, clearly sensing an opportunity to reassert authority. He's right. Quick Bite explicitly prohibits. Blake, Garrett interrupted sharply. When was the last time you actually visited this location? Before today? The regional manager stuttered. I've been overseeing multiple locations and the reports. 3 months, Carlos supplied. And that was just to yell at Tasha about drive-through times. Garrett nodded slowly, pieces clicking into place. He turned back to Darnell. Tell me about Marcus's treatment options. For the next 10 minutes, Darnell explained his son's condition in painful detail. The kidney function deterioration, the dialysis 3 times weekly, the experimental regenerative therapy that might help him avoid a transplant but wasn't covered by insurance. The specialist at Detroit Children's says he's a good candidate. Darnell finished. But the window is closing. Without intervention in the next few months. He couldn't complete the sentence. Garrett stood abruptly, his decision made. He removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, a gesture his employees knew meant business. Blake, you're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Tasha will manage this location until further notice. He turned to the shocked staff. I'm calling an emergency video meeting with my executive team in 1 hour. Darnell, you're joining us. Sir? Darnell looked bewildered. We're going to fix this. Not just for Marcus, but for all our employees. Garrett's voice had taken on a steel edge that had built an empire. Evie, I want you there too. And Carlos, anyone who contributed to this envelope. Blake's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't be serious. These people broke company policy. They should be disciplined, not rewarded. The room went still. The staff braced for Garrett's response, expecting corporate loyalty to win out. Instead, Garrett approached Blake slowly, his voice deadly quiet. My younger brother, Michael, died when I was 19. Kidney failure. Experimental treatment available, but my family couldn't afford it. Insurance denied coverage. Sound familiar? Blake swallowed hard, saying nothing. I watched him die slowly while working 3 jobs trying to save enough. Garrett continued. If someone had done for us what these people are trying to do for Darnell, I might still have my brother today. The revelation stunned everyone in the room. In 26 years, Garrett had never spoken publicly about his brother's death. So no, Blake, I won't be disciplining them. Garrett's voice hardened. But we will be having a very serious conversation about your management approach later. Right now, I have more important things to do. He turned to the staff, who were watching him with newfound understanding. I need this dining room cleared of customers in 30 minutes and set up for a video conference. We have a child to save and a company culture to rebuild. As the team scattered to prepare, Darnell remained seated, staring at the envelope. Why? He asked Garrett when they were alone. Why would you help us? Garrett placed a hand on the younger man's shoulder. Because 26 years ago, I promised my brother that if I ever had the power to prevent another family from going through what we did, I would use it. Today, I finally can. The dining area had been transformed in record time. Tables pushed aside, chairs arranged in a semicircle facing the largest wall where a projector now displayed the Quick Bite logo. Employees not involved in the meeting maintained a perimeter, turning away confused customers with free meal vouchers for their next visit. Garrett stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed but urgent tones to his CFO. Across the room, Darnell sat with his head in his hands, still processing the rapid turn of events. Evie sat beside him, occasionally patting his shoulder reassuringly. They're ready, Carlos announced, adjusting the video conference equipment one final time. The screen flickered, revealing a boardroom filled with startled executives. Garrett had given them just enough information to convene an emergency meeting, but not enough to prepare their usual corporate defenses. Ladies and gentlemen, Garrett began, standing tall before the camera. Today I discovered something at our Woodward Avenue location that requires immediate attention and represents both a failure and an opportunity for our company. For the next 20 minutes, he laid out the situation with precision: the struggling restaurant, Blake's absent management, Darnell's plight, and most surprisingly to the executives, the story of his brother Michael. Many of you have worked with me for years, Garrett continued, his voice growing thick with emotion he rarely displayed. Yet none of you knew that Quick Bite exists because of a promise made to a dying 19-year-old boy. The room fell silent, both in Detroit and at headquarters. Garrett pulled out his wallet and removed a worn photograph, holding it up to the camera. A teenage version of himself stood arm in arm with a Frielier boy, both grinning despite the hospital setting visible behind them. Michael was diagnosed with kidney disease when he was 16. By 17, he needed specialized treatment our insurance wouldn't cover. Our parents had already mortgaged everything for his initial treatments. I dropped out of college to work, but it was never enough. Garrett paused, the memory visibly painful. The night before he died, Michael made me promise not to waste my life in anger. To build something that mattered. 3 years later, I used my savings to buy my first failing burger joint, this very location. He gestured around the restaurant, and the camera followed his movement. I told myself I was just making a smart business investment. But deep down, I was fulfilling a promise. I built Quick Bite with one core principle, that people matter more than profits. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. Patricia Winters, the longtime HR director, spoke up from headquarters. Garrett, what exactly are you proposing? A comprehensive overhaul of our employee support systems, starting with an emergency medical fund for situations like Darnell's. He signaled for Darnell to join him. But first, we have a more immediate need. Darnell reluctantly stepped forward, uncomfortable under the scrutiny of so many corporate eyes. When he spoke, however, his voice carried the quiet dignity of a father fighting for his child. My son Marcus was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney disease 2 years ago. He's 9 years old. The doctors say he's a candidate for a new regenerative therapy, but our insurance won't cover experimental treatments. He swallowed hard. Without it, he'll need a transplant within months, and there's no guarantee we'll find a match in time. The financial team looked predictably nervous. Lawrence Green, the CFO, cleared his throat. While this is certainly moving, we can't simply. We can and we will. Garrett interrupted. I'm personally matching every dollar in that envelope tenfold from the company's emergency fund. That's approximately $10,000. I'm also authorizing an immediate advance of $65,000 to cover all projected expenses for Marcus's treatment. The executives erupted in a mixture of objections and questions. Garrett held up his hand for silence. This isn't charity, and it isn't just about Darnell. This is about who we are as a company. His voice grew passionate. For years, our mission statement has claimed we value our Quick Bite family above all. Are those just words on a plaque, or do we mean it? Patricia Winters nodded slowly. You're right, but we need a sustainable structure, not just a one-time exception. Exactly. Garrett turned to Evie, who had been quietly observing. That's where you and your colleagues come in. What you did for Darnell, that's the culture I want throughout our company. Evie straightened in her chair. We just did what seemed right. And that's precisely what policy should support, not prevent. Garrett addressed the executives again. I'm establishing the Darnell Fund, effective immediately. A company-wide program offering financial support for employees facing family medical emergencies. He outlined the basics. A substantial initial investment from the company, ongoing contributions from a portion of profits, an employee-led committee to evaluate cases, and a streamlined approval process to provide help when it was most needed. Lawrence, the CFO, looked pained. We'll need to run projections on the financial impact. Run them, Garrett agreed. But the fund is happening. Draft a proposal for sustained funding for board approval next week. Patricia, I want HR to craft guidelines with input from this team. He gestured to the Detroit staff. They've demonstrated more humanity than our policy manuals. The meeting continued for another half hour, with executives gradually shifting from resistance to reluctant acceptance and finally to cautious endorsement as they recognized the potential benefits: improved employee loyalty, reduced turnover, enhanced reputation. When the call ended, Garrett turned to find Darnell standing nearby, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. Garrett shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when Marcus is well and running around playing baseball again." Darnell nodded, then hesitated. "Your brother, would he be proud of this?" For the first time that day, Garrett smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Yes," he said softly. "I think he finally would be." 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The Woodward Avenue location remained open, but operated with a skeleton crew as Garrett insisted most of the staff participate in the rapid development of the Darnell Fund initiative. The restaurant's break room had been converted into a makeshift project headquarters. Walls covered with flowcharts, draft policies, and personal stories gathered from employees across the company. Evie, unexpectedly, had emerged as a natural leader, coordinating between the Detroit team and corporate headquarters. Garrett entered the room, finding Evie and Carlos deep in discussion with Patricia Winters from HR, who had flown in from headquarters. "We need clear eligibility criteria," Patricia was saying, "but not so rigid that deserving cases fall through the cracks." Evie pointed to a diagram she'd drawn. "What if we create a 2-track system? Critical care needs get expedited review within 48 hours, while non-emergency support follows a more thorough process?" Garrett smiled, watching silently from the doorway. The transformation in these employees was remarkable. Given genuine responsibility and purpose, they had blossomed from disengaged workers into passionate advocates. "That could work," Patricia agreed. "Garrett, what do you think?" He stepped fully into the room. "I think we're witnessing the rebirth of our company culture, one conversation at a time." He placed a folder on the table. "And I have news." Everyone gathered around as he opened it. "The board unanimously approved the Darnell Fund yesterday," he announced. "Initial funding at $5 million, with a guaranteed annual contribution of 1% of our net profits." Cheers erupted across the room. Patricia looked stunned. "That's considerably more than we proposed." "I made a compelling case," Garrett replied with a sly smile. "Additionally, I've restructured the regional management team. Blake won't be returning." Carlos exhaled loudly. "Best news I've heard all year." "Instead," Garrett continued, "I'm creating a new position, Director of Employee Advocacy for this region. Tasha has shown remarkable leadership these past 2 weeks. The position is hers if she wants it." Tasha, who had been quietly organizing paperwork in the corner, looked up in shock. "Me? But I'm just a shift manager." "Not anymore," Garrett replied. "You saw what was happening with Darnell and did nothing to help, but you also didn't interfere with your team's efforts to support him. That tells me you have potential for growth." He turned to address the entire room. "But the biggest surprise isn't about management, or even the fund itself. It's about how we're launching it." Garrett pulled out his tablet and played a video, a professionally produced announcement about the Darnell Fund, featuring interviews with employees from across the company sharing stories of hardship and hope. "This launches on all our social media channels tomorrow, along with local and national press releases," he explained. "We're not hiding this as some internal policy change. We're celebrating it as a recommitment to our founding values." Evie frowned slightly. "Isn't that a bit self-congratulatory? Using Darnell's struggle for corporate PR?" Garrett appreciated her candor. "It would be, except for 2 things. First, Darnell and Marcus approved every frame. And second..." The door swung open, interrupting him. Darnell stood there, but not in his usual dishwasher uniform. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and tie, looking years younger than he had just weeks ago. "Sorry I'm late," he said, beaming. "Doctor's appointment ran long. Marcus's preliminary tests came back even better than expected." The room erupted in applause and questions, As Darnell shared the promising medical updates, Garrett pulled Evie aside. The second reason, he continued quietly, is because Darnell insisted on telling his story publicly. But there's more. Show them, Darnell. Darnell reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. As of this morning, I'm no longer a dishwasher. Mr. Langston has appointed me the first Darnell Fund Administrator. I'll be working directly with employees facing medical crises across the company. Stunned silence fell across the room, quickly replaced by cheers and tearful congratulations. Carlos clapped Darnell on the back, his gruff exterior cracking to reveal genuine joy. But who'll wash the dishes? He joked, wiping at his eyes. I've restructured the entire compensation model for this location, Garrett explained. Starting wages increased by 22%, with additional healthcare benefits. We had 12 applications for Darnell's position within hours of posting it. Patricia shook her head in amazement. The board approved all this? They didn't just approve it, Garrett replied. They're expanding it. The success metrics from this location will establish the blueprint for company-wide implementation. Tasha looked confused. Success metrics? But our numbers have been terrible. Not anymore. Garrett displayed another tablet screen showing the location's performance data. Since these changes began 2 weeks ago, employee callouts have dropped 67%. Customer satisfaction is up 12%. Even with the reduced staff, efficiency has improved dramatically. The evidence was undeniable. By investing in people rather than just processes, the very metrics Blake had obsessed over were improving organically. There's one more thing, Garrett said, his voice growing serious. Something I haven't told anyone yet. The room quieted, all eyes on him. The experimental treatment for Marcus? It's being provided by the Langston Foundation, a new nonprofit I'm establishing in my brother's memory. The Darnell Fund is just the beginning. He looked around at the stunned faces, landing finally on Darnell. We're going to help a lot of families, Darnell. Starting with yours, but not ending there. Never ending there. Darnell, overwhelmed, could only nod in response. Evie slipped her hand into his, offering silent support. No, Garrett said, his voice returning to its businesslike tone, though his eyes remained warm. Let's finalize these guidelines. We launch tomorrow, and there's still much to do. 3 months later, Garrett stood in the gleaming lobby of Detroit Children's Hospital, a bouquet of balloons in one hand and a small baseball glove in the other. The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the pediatric floor. The hospital had become familiar territory over the past months. Weekly visits to check on Marcus had evolved from corporate obligation to personal commitment. Nurses greeted him by name as he made his way down the corridor to room 412. He paused outside the door, hearing laughter from within, a sound that had been absent during his early visits when Marcus had been too weak to do more than whisper. Garrett knocked gently before entering. Mr. Langston! Marcus called out from the bed, his voice stronger than it had been just a week ago. Though still thin, color had returned to the boy's face, and the dark circles beneath his eyes had faded. Darnell sat beside the bed in a suit that fit him better than the first one had. Clearly, he was growing comfortable in his new role. He rose to shake Garrett's hand. The doctor was just here, Darnell said, his voice tight with barely contained joy. The regenerative therapy is working even better than they hoped. Kidney function is up to 62%. That's incredible, Garrett said, handing the balloons to Marcus and placing the baseball glove on the bed. I heard someone might be getting discharged tomorrow. Marcus's eyes widened. Dad, you didn't tell me. Darnell laughed. Wanted to make sure before I got your hopes up. But yes, we're going home tomorrow. The celebration was interrupted by a knock at the door. A nurse poked her head in. Mr. Johnson? There's a news crew in the lobby asking for you and Mr. Langston. Something about a viral video? Darnell and Garrett exchanged puzzled glances. What viral video? Garrett asked. The nurse shrugged. All I know is it's about QuickBite and it's everywhere. 20 minutes later, They watched the video on a tablet in the hospital cafeteria. It had started as a simple TikTok, a customer filming their surprise when they opened their quick bite bag to find a Darnell Fund card explaining the initiative and inviting customers to donate. But what had gone viral was the reaction of the employees in the background. Evie, Carlos, and the others were wearing special Darnell Fund founder pins, explaining the program with obvious pride. Their genuine enthusiasm, so rare in fast food promotional videos, had struck a chord. The video had millions of views, with thousands of supportive comments and shares. More importantly, the nurse added, scrolling through her phone, people are showing up at Quick Bite locations across the country, specifically asking how they can contribute. Garrett leaned back in his chair, stunned. The corporate rollout had been successful by conventional metrics, but this organic customer response was beyond anything they'd anticipated. His phone buzzed, a text from Patricia at headquarters. Traffic up 37% nationwide. Employee applications up 215%. Board wants emergency meeting to discuss expansion. Also, have you seen the stock price today? He checked the markets and nearly dropped his phone. Quick Bite shares had jumped 12% since opening bell. This wasn't the plan, Darnell said quietly. I never wanted to be the face of anything. Garrett understood his discomfort. It's not about you specifically, Darnell. You've become a symbol of something people desperately want to believe in. That corporations can have a soul, that kindness can coexist with commerce. Another nurse approached their table. Excuse me, but are you the Darnell from the Darnell Fund? My sister works at Quick Bite in Phoenix, and she told me, well, my mom needs heart surgery, and the fund just approved her application yesterday. Darnell stood and hugged the woman without hesitation. I'm so glad we could help, he said, his initial discomfort fading in the face of tangible impact. As the nurse walked away, wiping tears, Garrett's phone rang, the company's PR director, frantic with requests for interviews. Tell them we'll do one joint statement, Garrett decided. Not about the fund's success, but about Marcus going home tomorrow. That's the real victory here. Later that evening, after finalizing arrangements for Marcus's discharge, Garrett returned to the Woodward Avenue restaurant. The transformation was remarkable, not just the fresh paint and new equipment, but the energy of the staff and the steady stream of customers. Carlos greeted him at the door. Business is booming. Had to call in extra help for the evening shift. And the quality? Garrett asked, ever the CEO. Carlos grinned. Come see for yourself. In the kitchen, a framed envelope hung on the wall, the original envelope that had started everything. Beneath it, a plaque read, The Darnell Fund, because people matter more than profits. The staff moved with purpose, greeting each other with genuine camaraderie. Even the newest employees seemed to understand they were part of something special. Tasha approached, clipboard in hand. 3 more locations want to implement our employee recognition program. And we've had 15 internal transfer requests from people wanting to work here specifically. The worst performing restaurant in the company is now the model everyone wants to emulate, Garrett mused. All because someone cared enough to hide money in a food bag. As if on cue, Evie emerged from the office, now wearing a manager's uniform. Speaking of which, she said, handing him a letter. This just came for you. The envelope was addressed in a child's handwriting. Inside was a drawing of a baseball player and a short note. Dear Mr. Langston, thank you for helping my dad and me. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Maybe I can work for you someday. Your friend, Marcus Johnson. Beneath the note was a small photograph, Marcus in his hospital bed, proudly wearing the baseball glove Garrett had given him. Garrett carefully placed the drawing and photo back in the envelope. Make sure this gets framed for my office. The one here or at headquarters? Evie asked. Garrett smiled. Both. I'll be splitting my time between them from now on. Some things are too important to delegate. As he walked through the bustling restaurant, watching customers drop donations into the Darnell Fund box by the register, Garrett felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in decades. Somewhere, he was certain Michael was smiling. The promise had finally been kept.